Hi, I'm Amy Moritz, and welcome to our latest episode of Women's Empower Active, an initiative of UR Sportswear to help all women of all different levels live active, healthy lifestyles. And want to remind you off the top that if you want to join the conversation, we'd love to have you. Just tweet your questions to @UR Sportswear and use the hashtag #StrongWomen. And so excited today to have Krissy Moehl with us, ultra runner extraordinaire and author. So Krissy, first of all, welcome so much to Women Empower Active.
Wow, what a cool thing to get to be a part of. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. And let's just start. We always kind of start at this place where we talk about take you back to when you first started trail running and started ultra running. And I was reading a story about you that kind of had to pester you to either do a trail run or to do an ultra. It took you a while before you actually committed to doing it. So kind of just take us back to how you got started.
I was just being in the right place at the right time. I just returned from a quarter abroad in Ecuador, and the running store that I was working at had been purchased while I was away, and it was purchased by Scott McCubry, and he hired Scott Jurek to work for him. And Scott Jurek had just won his first Western States. Scott Jurek went on to win 7 Western States. So I feel like I fell right in with this group really early on as we were all kind of growing up in the sport. And the pestering part, they would go on these Sunday morning runs. And I was a senior in college at the time, and Sundays was the only morning I got to sleep in. So I just pestered back. Like, no, I'm not getting up early. Like, that's my only day to sleep in. And they got me out. I think we'd been out as a group at a road run or something, like a little race the night before, and they said, no excuses, you have to join us tomorrow. And after I did that, I never missed one. And then I ran Chuckanut 50K as my first ultra in the year 2000, so right before spring break of my senior year of college.
And what was it about because you had been a road runner before you got onto the trails?
I mean, I ran cross country and track in high school and college at the University of Washington, and as a walk-on. And then in the summers, I would run around and do as many road races as I could sign up for, and the half marathon was the furthest I'd gone before I did a 50K.
So you went from half marathon to 50K?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Pretty. Yeah. Went right for it there. What was it when you first started? What was it that became exhilarating or addicting? What made you know that this was for you?
I feel there's a couple different things, but the main one for me is I got into the community. I found that ultra running, I'd always been a runner. Like, I have a tattoo of a runner on my body. Like, I have always been a runner. But when I found ultra running, I felt like the energy started coming back. So rather than just putting energy into being something or being a part of something, the energy actually fed me as well. So it became more sustainable, really. So I attribute it to the people that I met and the time that I met. And then the other piece of that is where my 2 legs could take me. Like, I used to look at mountains and think, oh, like, those are pretty. And now I look at them and think, how can I get there? And that was a cool kind of wake up.
And then, of course, on your resume I'm looking up at the year here, 2005 was a big year for you when you completed the Grand Slam of ultra running, the youngest to do so. What was that year like for you? I mean, did you set out that goal to do it at that time? Was that something in your sights?
Yeah, I run my first 100 just the year before at the Wasatch Front 100 in 2004. And then I knew I wasn't getting any younger, and I actually was working for Montreal, the footwear company at the time, and I told my boss that I had this dream of running the Grand Slam of ultra running, and he told me that was silly, that I couldn't do it. I was too young and too inexperienced, and so I used that as motivation to do exactly that. So it's kind of one of those, don't tell me what I can't do, because I will go do it.
and do it and do it. You did, and was it Vermont that you won that year, the Vermont 100?
I did, and I'm really bad with sports terms, but they said that what is it in baseball where you go for the cycle or something, because I was first at Vermont, second at Leadville, third at Wasatch, and fourth at Western States. So whatever that, like when you hit all the bases in baseball, I did that by hitting all the top 4 spots in one of the races that summer.
There you go. You cycled. Yes, you did. You ran for the cycle and the Grand Slam. And so after they told you, right? You were told like you're too young, too inexperienced to do it. When you finished it, and what was that like? Was that a high moment for you to after people had told you, oh, you can't do it?
There was just a few that told me I couldn't. Then I actually had a lot of support from family and friends. My mom actually got all of the vacation lined up for herself so she could be at every single event before I had registered for every event. So I had somebody kind of on my team even before I was completely ready to go for it. So that was kind of cool.
That is amazing. And you mentioned the community of ultra running, and that's something that a lot of people seem to mention. And while you're competing out there, it also seems that it's such a very supportive atmosphere. Something that is, even though you might have friends that are running with you at a traditional half marathon or marathon, it seems to be a very different type of atmosphere when you start going to 50K, 50 mile, 100 mile.
Definitely. And I think that's that community piece that spoke to me. I'd done a lot of road racing over the years, but when I got in with that, it's like kind of being a part of a new tribe or something like that.
And now when you have your crew, because obviously you have people who should know in the ultra community, you have crew that helps you through the race. Do you have consistent crew members? Does it go different people depending upon the race and time of year?
And location, because I do travel a lot for events. So if I can haul people along, I do. The cool, this year I was able to pull together 12 people, which is a massive crew, to help me get around Lake Tahoe. And that was one of my top, I want to say there's probably like 5 that I can think off the top of my head, but top crewing experiences with just people coming together for something that's greater than all of us, and me, whether it's my race goal or somebody else's race goal, but there's something really cool that happens when everybody clicks, and getting around Tahoe this summer was definitely that.
What was special about that crew? Was it just the way everybody clicked together?
That was a huge part. A lot of them, they all knew each other and kind of knew of each other, but to have 12 people be able to stay up for 48 hours, more than 48 hours, and drive, I don't even know how many miles to my 170. Some of them ran about 70 miles with me, and still to be happy and cheerful and stopping for groceries and picking up random things at convenience stores and busting themselves back out to the trail and finding me in the middle of nowhere. And they all had so much fun the whole time that it made my job of getting around the lake so seamless. Like, I never had to worry about drama or somebody getting upset or somebody feeling like their toes were stepped on, or what. Everybody just worked really well together and had a really great time doing it, like making jokes. They took over my Instagram feed and just had a blast. Everything was just perfect and seamless.
And how is that? Because for you, as far as a crew, and I'm going to ask you some specifics because you have written a book for people doing their first. Well, it's geared towards first timers, newbies, but it's great information for anybody, as we were talking about earlier. But when you're picking a crew, they're in service of you, but do you also feel responsible a little bit for what they're going through because they're helping you?
Hugely, yeah. And that was another key thing about this summer one, and I tried to do in my previous events as well, is I was able to get sponsorship support from a lot of my sponsors to cover their costs. So they're giving me their time to be out there, but to get all the way down to California from Saturday to Wednesday, and so to have the support of Cliff Bar and Patagonia and Vask and Flora and Protect, they all jumped in to make sure that this event could go as well as possible, and everybody felt like really a part of something.
And so when you're putting together a crew, let's just jump right into some specifics here. What are you looking for? What do you need from crew people to help support you?
Crewing is a very selfless act. Like, it's running these long distances, it can be very selfish. So just nurturing people, I think, is a big one. And I think a lot of times it works really well if you have had a reciprocal. Like I crewed for Gina this summer at Western States, and you can kind of do that back and forth.
Uh-huh.
Their own fitness, and their own awareness. I didn't want anybody to run more miles with me because they felt like they had to take care of me. I wanted them to run miles that they were capable of, period. So if, that meant running 10 miles, great. If it meant running 70, like Darcy and Gina did, amazing. But first and foremost, you have to have the awareness to take care of yourself so that you're able to help the runner rather than be a hindrance to them or a setback or something like that. And just like a cheery outlook, like it makes all the difference when things get rough. If somebody looks at you and makes a goofy face or puts some food in your hand and says, "Come on, get this down," like having that ability to just take the lighter side of the project or whatever.
And you mentioned your crew a lot in your TEDx talk. I watched your TEDx talk on YouTube, and I think hopefully You Are Sportswear will link to that so that people can watch you give this talk. But you were talking about 2009 and Western States, and can you just briefly you talked about the three strategies I think that you always had, and it was smile. I remember smile and competition, and that you put competition ahead of smiling, and that kind of made it a difficult, set you back in that race, actually.
Yeah, for me, it's the most important first to make sure that I'm having fun. Like, I have to have a good time. So smile is kind of the synopsis of that. The second, and not in any priority order, they both kind of go together, is that everybody around me is having a good time. So if they're enjoying themselves, that means no yelling at your crew. Like, I just don't have a tolerance for that. Being thankful, being gracious, checking in with them, making sure they're having fun. And once those two things are accomplished and you're moving well through the race, that's when the competition can step in. And that's much later in the event. You have to get through a lot of the early parts and the rough and the lows, knowing that you've maintained a happiness and a togetherness with your crew before you can then put your head down and really go for it.
Yes. And I mean, we'll talk about the physical training and that part, but how I think there's probably many of us who are runners, and to wrap our head around doing 50 miles or 100 miles at a time is harder than even thinking about how our legs are going to feel like they're going to fall off at that point. So what for you, what is that balance? Is it a balance between that mental and physical component when you're doing ultra races?
Hugely, yeah. The way I kind of try and, I guess, how it makes sense to me, how do you wrap your head around something, is it really depends on what you set yourself up for. So if you think you're going to go on a 5-hour run and it ends up being 3 hours, you're probably going to feel gypped. But if you think you're going on a 3-hour run and it ends up being 5, then you're going to be worked. So same thing goes for a race. If you set yourself up like, I'm going to run 100 miles today, if it became 50 all of a sudden, like, I know people that drop out of a 100-mile race and they made 80 miles, but they feel like they didn't accomplish something. You still ran 80 miles, but it's what we had our head set up for the day. So I think that translates for that, first timer looking ahead to like, what is that going to feel like? What is it? All of the training and everything you do in preparation for and leading up to gives you that ability to be like, okay, I kind of have an idea. I'm going to be out a really long time. Don't set any super high time goals for yourself. I think the first time you run your longest distance, so the first time you run 50 miles, the first time you run 100 miles, it should always be about finishing rather than finishing in this much time or finishing in this place or whatever, because you'll do things in your race performance that might hinder the actual finish to achieve these other goals that you set. The finish should be the first priority, and then all those other things can come later once you kind of figure out how to run that distance. But you're right, getting your head around it is the biggest challenge, I think, to even get started.
Do you, or have you ever, do you chunk? Because if you think about 50 or 100 miles, that can be a lot. So do you break it up into smaller pieces, or do you look at the big picture?
A little bit of both, but as I'm in the moment, it's definitely getting to that next spot. So, like thinking back to Tahoe, it was all broken down by who I was running with. I had pacers the entire way, and they would switch out at different spots. So it was not necessarily broken down by the next 30 miles. It was broken down by I'm going to run Darcy and Jen till then I pick up Gina and Jeff, and then I pick up Jeff and Neil, and that's how I kind of got myself around the lake, was thinking about who was I going to get to run with at different sections.
And does that, I mean, that obviously you think that it makes it more manageable, or that's the plan. Does it work out that way most times, that it kind of helps you manage that, or maybe manage the expectation of pain before you get to the pain?
Definitely, and that's a hard one for me, the whole pain thing. I mean, yeah, it does hurt, but I love running so much. It's kind of weird, I guess, because a lot of people really don't love to run. So I kind of go back to the fact that I really love doing what I'm doing, and if it's hurting really bad, then it might not be the right thing right now. So, like, if my knee is causing me to limp because my IT band's too tight or something, like if it's really painful in terms of something that's hindering my ability to move forward, that's when I need to pull back and question in what I'm doing. If it's muscle fatigue, if it's any of those things that people associate with it, just running being hard, not an injury, just running being hard.
Right.
I really, really think it just goes back to nutrition. And if you're probably just low blood sugar. So if it just feels really hard, or your quads are, and you have no idea how you're going to get through the next 5 miles, take 2 gels, not just one, or eat a Clif Bar, eat a sandwich, or suck down a milkshake, whatever it takes to get some more calories in your body, because I think we try and operate on not enough, because when you're out there, you're burning so much more than you're able to consume. So before you think about how hard it is, try and think about, when was the last time I put something in my body? Tell me this.
So let's use that to segue into some specifics then. Like and I know people are very different, but what do you use for nutrition, and how have you changed your nutrition strategy over your career?
Definitely. And my biggest thing is this nutrition strategy is flexibility, because I'm a total spreadsheet dork, and you'll see that in the back of my book. I've got a race budget, a race day packing list, how to track your training, core workout, all this stuff is all in spreadsheet format in the back of the book, and that's how I plan. So everything's really detailed out, and I hand it over to my crew, and I say, and now everything will probably change. And it's just having the ability to be as prepared as you can, but know that it might not run exactly as you were hoping. Like, they ended up making me bacon avocado quesadillas at mile 105, and those were the best things ever. I don't know if I could ever eat that again, but it was so good in that moment, and I never would have planned for that. But myself, for nutrition, my baseline really does involve a lot of the products that are out there. Clif Bar, I've been with Clif Bar as long as I can remember, whether they've been a sponsor or I've picked up the products myself. In 2005 for the Grand Slam, I picked up a sponsor called First Endurance, and they have a recovery drink called Ultradent, and I swear by that stuff. I recover. I kind of dream of it as I get towards the end of a long run, because I know that'll allow me to get out again the next day, because it just kind of hits the spot in terms of recovery. And they have a lot of supplements as well. And then I think daily nutrition factors in a lot. People spend, what do you eat when you run? But that's only, sometimes that's only 30 minutes to an hour, sometimes 8 hours a day. But, on your consistency, you're only running for an hour a day. So what are you eating the rest of the day? And how do you integrate good fats? Like, I use the 7 sources from Flora, and getting enough minerals and vitamins and that kind of stuff through your nutrition and additional supplements if you need it. So it's more than just what you eat when you're running. It's everything. It's
how it all comes together, right? It all ties together. Yeah. So give us a general idea of how you go about training, like what's the general sort of approach that you take to, especially for newbies. Say there's someone out there who either is already planning to do one this year, or is kind of like me and is like, it's on my bucket list. What is the training like? How does it maybe different from other long distance training that we might be used to or accustomed to seeing?
Gotcha. For me, the main one is consistency, like just staying consistent. And if that's, you only have 20 minutes a day, that's better than nothing. And it's also better than going out for 3 hours on a Saturday and not running the rest of the week. So I would much rather see a client run, or just a runner, or a friend, whoever, run, the 15, 20 minutes that they can a day, just to keep that consistency. The main difference I picked up from running with all of those guys back in the day, in difference from a marathon training plan from an ultra plan, is these back-to-backs. So a lot of times in longer distance training, marathons or whatever, you'll have a lot of recovery around your big long run, where an ultra is what I found trains both body and mind more so, is doing another run after you've done your long run. So you might wake up kind of creaky and sore the next day, but getting out on those legs and kind of talking to yourself like, okay, this is what it might feel like at mile 80. I got to get out of the chair at the aid station and get going again. That's what it'll feel like. Because you do get a bit of recovery if you get a good night's sleep and you eat well, and you get up and do your other run, you're able to train your body for the longer distances without the massive breakdown. What I compare to, like in a marathon, you'll probably run 80–85% of your mileage in your last long run. So you'll run 20 miles or 26-mile marathon in your last long run. If you ran 80 miles of your 100-miler, you're done. Like, you can't recover from an 80-mile run. That's a big effort. So these back-to-backs are stacked on top of each other are what gets you ready for the longer races, to me, in my mind, and consistency.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the mistakes that newbies make? Are there mistakes that you see often that newbies that you wish you could tell them something different?
I feel like I've been really lucky to work with a lot of great clients that ask questions before they make the mistake. Like, hey, I was thinking about getting a new shirt for race day. No. Don't do that. Don't get a brand new pair of shoes. Maybe get a new pair of shoes 3 weeks before your race if you're feeling like the mileage is pounded out of your old ones or something. But so I think one thing that could be common is people try new things on race day, and I really am an advocate for having tried everything prior to race day. And so you might splurge a little bit and see something on the aid station table and know that it's a risk that you maybe hadn't trained with it, but you're going to give it a try because it looks good. So if you're in tune enough with your body and aware that, yeah, that will work good, then you can kind of go that way. But I would just really push for people to try everything before they actually go to race day or even big run day or whatever.
Okay. All right, we have a question that came in from Twitter. So the question is, how do you determine that your base run was worth it? Or something you're happy with when your mileage and time is variable depending upon where you run. So I guess, when especially when you're trail running and when you're doing some of these long distances, traditional road marathoning is, you've got time, you've got tempo runs and time-based and pace and all of that. So how do you determine that your back-to-backs, those long runs that you're doing where you might have elevation and trail and different variances in where you are, how do you know when you've done a good training run?
Wow, that's a really good question. I feel like it's an awareness thing of your own body. A good measure is recovery. How well did you recover from it? Were you exhausted for the next week, or did you feel pretty good? Could you get back to it? And a lot of that's going to be not necessarily on your run, it's going to be on your nutrition. So did you sleep well and eat well and hydrate well during and after your run to be able to recover well and have that kind of measure? I think for these long distance races, we tend to get these big dreams to travel to different places and compete in events that are not like our backyard. So the terrain is very different. And that's a really hard measure. How do you know if you're going to be ready for the canyons of western states if you live in flatland Midwest or something like that. So that's a really hard one to gauge. You just kind of do the best you can with what you have, and mentally prepare the most you can. Like visualization has gotten me through so many events that I might not have otherwise had as much success at.
So speak to a little bit more about visualization and how you use that. Or do you use that? Do you sit and visualize the course and race day? Are you doing that when you're on your long runs? How do you incorporate that? We hear a lot of runners talk about that, but how do you incorporate that into your training?
It has gotten to be a lot less as I've gotten older. Just I don't know time, how much, and all of that. But I really brought it back this summer when I was getting ready for Tahoe for many reasons. But the way I tend to incorporate it is looking at maps and kind of checking out the terrain. If you have a chance to go run on the terrain prior, awesome, because then you can then visualize it. I do a lot of my visualization right before I go to sleep at night, so laying down kind of a meditative thought process. And what was really cool about Tahoe is that one was 170 miles. For the 2 weeks prior, I never got all the way around the lake in my visualization before falling asleep, except for the night before the event I did. And that was kind of a like a really cool, give me goosebumps kind of, I wonder if this means something, like I finally got all the way around in my visualization. And then those like back-to-back runs, like kind of that mindset that I said, when you get out on your Sunday run after doing a long run Saturday and your legs are tired and you got to keep going, like putting that in your head, like, okay, this is what it might feel like getting out of the chair at mile 80, and I can do it, like, and put it in your head, like, I can do it. What does it take to get me to do it? What do I need to do to have that confidence that my legs will keep me going?
And how much during training, and maybe more when you were starting than now that you have that experience, but when you're training, is it not so much about being perfect in training, but about learning, like, okay, what is it going, yeah, okay, so what does my body need when it's feeling like this in order to get through it? Is that one of maybe the keys of training for ultras?
I think so, and just awareness. If there's something that I hope comes out of that book for runners or non-runners, whoever reads it, is just your own body awareness. Like, check in, like, what does it take? Why are my eyes so tired? Don't drink another cup of coffee, take a nap. Like, listen to what really benefits your body and helps you just exist in the day. And as an ultra runner, I think that becomes, like, the demand of that is much more important. So if you can find that awareness, I honestly think that's why I've done as well as I have, is just checking in and not going out so hard that I can't keep up with everybody, or I'm trying to keep up with everybody and my heart rate is through my throat and then I blow up later. Like, I've always had this kind of governor on my body that's held me back, and like I've listened, and then I'm able to push when it gets to the end because I've taken care of myself getting up to that point.
Is that how difficult is that for you at the start of a race to maybe hold back? Maybe, because there's that competitive part, right, where you're counting the ponytails going up the mountain. But you also know that you don't want to blow out in the first, 25 miles.
Yeah, I've quickly learned that I'm not a very patient person in life, but I quickly learned patience in ultra running because my body would never let me go out that hard. I was never a fast runner. In fact, that's how Scott McCoubry kind of convinced me, or what he saw in me that made him think that I could do these long distance runs, was the fact that it didn't matter if I was running 10K or half marathon or 5K. My speed didn't change. My form didn't change. I just stayed the same. Didn't matter how long the distance got or short the distance got. I just had the same gait, and so it just stays that way even 80 miles in. So that's, by attrition, I actually do better by longer runs because I don't have that gear in the beginning. So my body actually, I don't have to hold myself back. The one time, that Western States run that I talk about in the TED Talk, I actually tried something different on race day, and it totally, well, I shouldn't say it totally blew up. I ended up placing well that day, but by my standards in terms, I spent the next 6 hours in the medical tent and had to have IV bags, and that's not why I do this stuff. And so by my standards, I hadn't run well.
And you mentioned like that's not why you do this. How important is it, do you think, or has it been for you to know your why when you're out there for a long run, or when you're out there for a 50 or 100 miler, to when it gets tough to remember your why?
Mm-hmm. It's very important, and I think the why actually changes too. There's different motivations at different times in life, and going through 2 decades of this, I feel like I've seen that. It's really easy to say I love running and I'll always be a runner, but there's definitely different motivations that have seen me through different years out here, and kind of having a good check-in with that every once in a while. There's been years that my why is, why do I own so many running shoes? Why am I going for a run again today? You know, I definitely have those periods of, and they've been longer than, a couple days, like months at a time, where it's like I still can. What is it? Like, I consider myself a runner. I'll always be a runner, but it ebbs and flows in terms of how involved in it I am, I guess. And this time of year is definitely that for me. I get focused on other projects, and I'm the race director of Chuckanut, which is coming up, so I'll kind of dive into that here to get that going. The registration opens on Friday, so if people are looking to do the race, yeah, it opens up on Friday, so I need to be on it. That's tomorrow morning.
That's
But yeah, so I think it's an important to remember the why, but it's also good to, like, you don't always have to be that intense about it. Like, that we are human, we do ebb and flow, and so allow yourself that time that, you know what, I don't know what race I'm doing next. It'll come to me when I'm ready for it.
And do you also, do you have, like, right now, do you have your why? Do you have a race on the calendar? Do you have a why, or are you in that? I know your race director hat is going to be on here soon, so is that more your focus right now?
That's where I'm focused, and I just actually launched a new training group up here in Bellingham. It's a group coaching program that right now we're training people for the Chuckanut 50K, and we meet 2 times a week, and then they have an online training program. And I'm actually really enjoying having this group because, one, it's keeping me, out there and running with people, but it's not for myself right now. It's for this group, and I'm actually really, really loving that. That's my why right now.
So yeah, so your why is for the group, is for the training group right now.
And my sanity. People say, "Gosh, you must be crazy to run that far," and to be honest with you, I think it's what keeps me sane. And so on days when I get going on these projects, I don't necessarily need to take my watch and have a certain timed run or get a workout in or anything, but I do need to get out the door and be moving and breathing hard and sweating for at least a half an hour just to clear my head and be a good person.
Are there things that, and I'm sure that there are, so I don't know what you might want to share with us, but are there things that, when you're in your head for these for long runs, when you're doing 100-mile races, are there things that you've learned about yourself? Do you come out the other side knowing something about yourself that you didn't know at the start line?
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, in fact, one of the races, 2008, I ran the Grindstone 100, and I'd been working really hard. I was working for a nonprofit at the time and doing a lot of travel. And I was at a convention the week before and got sick and was just compacted. I had no ability to breathe through my nose. And I'd been questioning my commitment to the ultra running community, not the community, but just wanting to do these long distances all year. It'd been hard to train, and I'd been distracted by lots of different things for the whole entire year. I didn't know why I owned so many pairs of shoes. But I'd signed up for this race, and when I say I'm going to do something, I do it. And even though I was sick, I still started, and it was in that race and while I was out there that I realized, almost like a reminder that I remembered that this is me. Like, it doesn't matter if it's hard or I'm not 100% psyched on it. Like, it will always be a part of me. So every race has definitely taught me a lesson, and sometimes I have to learn the lesson multiple times.
You keep getting the lesson until you really, really learn it, right? Isn't that what they say?
Or have to be reminded of it again.
So you have the book that came out last month, and I know you're starting a book tour soon. About that. Um, what are some things that basics that you want newbies or people who might be thinking about it to know, like where to start?
Oh, I guess the introduction to the book turns around and asks the reader a lot of questions. Like,
Hmm.
so if you want to run, what is your normal, what does your day include that whether this is a possibility or not? So I guess it goes back to that awareness that I hope everybody can gain from this, like awareness of the reality of their life, awareness of how this will impact the people around them, who they need to call on, who do they have as resources, who do they need to reach out to. Um, yeah, I guess my biggest hope with the book is that people will check in with themselves and figure out what's possible, and then I always say, like, these ultras are what teach me about myself and where my limits are and what I'm able to push through, and I'm always surprised, and I think that's such a gift. And if people can, get through that without having to make as many mistakes as I did early on, then I think I will accomplish something.
So, 16 years into this, are you still learning about your limits and where you can push through?
I mean, Tahoe was 170 miles. I'd run 130 miles prior to that, so I couldn't have even fathomed that I could have run that far. But all the lessons that I learned in the 16 years prior, that wasn't just one summer of training. That was 15 years that led me up, 16 years that led me up to that point to be able to do that.
As we start to wrap up our time here, we had meant to talk before about before we went live about women, the number of women involved in the ultra community, and you mentioned that it actually, first of all, the numbers, the overall numbers are still small, but that it's growing, that there are more women who are participating in ultras.
Definitely, yeah. I I was living in Boulder, so just the last 2 or 3 years is the first time in my career that I've been able to run with like women's group. I'd always trained with men leading up to this point, and it was such a blessing, and we had so much fun meeting every Wednesday morning and going for a long run. And there's a really cool dynamic that happens when you get just women together, and I imagine it's the same when you get just guys together. And then there's a very cool dynamic when you get men and women together, especially out on the trails. You're so raw and real and stripped down that we're just who we are, and we love each other for it. So anyways, I'm excited to see the sport growing, and not only just women coming in, but younger people coming in. When I got in, I was 22 years old when I ran my first 50K, and the average age of the sport was 47 white male. So to see the demographic of the sport really change, and people in their 20s running ultras is not a weird thing anymore. You're not going to be told by your mom and your doctor and people that you shouldn't and can't do the Grand Slam of ultra running, because the sport's changing, and we're showing that, yeah, the human body's pretty amazing, and the mind's even stronger. So
That's great. And the last thing we always ask our guests is what your words of encouragement or advice would be to women who are watching today.
Well, to everybody, I always say smile. Like we're so lucky that we get to go out and explore, and the trails is what we consider we kind of identify ourselves with trail running. I think that's so cool. So enjoy it. Like, it gets hard sometimes, but look up and look around and look what you've accomplished. And that was the first lesson I learned in ultra running, and it's the one I carry through everything.
Well, Krissy Moehl, thank you so much for joining us. It's been lovely talking with you. I can't wait to pick up your book. So, and we will have some links on UR Sportswear too for your information and your TEDx talk that you did. And thank you so much, and good luck with race directing and whatever might come next for you.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. It's great to have something like this out there in our sport.
Great. Well, yeah, and thanks everybody who joined us, either live or if you're watching us on tape, and we will see you next time. So peace out.